Hello, and today in science, we are looking at double track. So quite often with a very high production industry, you will end up building a quite big station, which will more than saturate a single track. So here you see two compact PBS railroads side by side, and they are obviously handling lots of trains and they're splitting up lots of trains. Now this is my control experiment. So these are two completely separate, independent PBS railroads. Not separate in terms of stations, but they're separate in terms of track work. And I've tested this. This saturates at kind of 22 trains, 11 trains per side, and the sawmill is producing about 3,400 crates of goods, which is all good. But of course, most of the time you won't actually be doing this. You will be needing to use your double track main line. Trains will be needing to swap to different sides. They might have breakdowns and things like that going on. So I wanted to look at what was actually the best way to organise your tracks to switch between junctions here. So we have obviously, as a very simple dumb experiment, the single track. And so I want to see just how much worse the single track is for throughput. Like, is it worth building double track in the first place? And there's then this, which is the humble X crossover. This tends to have a problem because the train from this side goes through here. Another train is following it and goes, ooh, that signal's red, but I've got a sneaky green signal that I can go down here, which is what you want to happen. But then the train here goes, ooh, but that signal's red, so I want to go this way. And then you're back down to sort of single track throughput after a while, because the trains are always going across this junction. At least that's the theory. So what I tend to do in my games is I tend to do this thing, and I've named this after in honour of Trackmania, the chained flip-flap, because I needed a name for it and that seemed like the best way, which is where the train goes, and the first one can only go one direction, and there's each one. Now, I find sometimes these still have the crossover problem, and that trains will flip and then they will flap back, but they're less likely to. Especially if a train kind of stops here, and the train will sort of carry along here. So I think this will have higher capacity. And then there's this. Let me take you down here so these tracks aren't getting muddled up. This is the co-op style gameplay, where you have a very, very complex track setup. Let me just get this correct. This, actually, no, that was correct. That's fine. So this one. So you already see from me having fiddled with that signal that this, in theory, is the best way of doing things. But it also comes with its challenges, which is actually building one of these in gameplay. If you think you just want to sort of rip out a quick junction, you do plop one in, this is not going to happen that way. This is going to be very painstaking, very hard to build. I found when I was building this, I made multiple mistakes that I didn't get it right. But this, in theory, should be optimal. This should be as good as you can get while still letting trains go one way or the other on the tracks. And so I'm going to start out just by not having the trains needing to switch tracks. They are just going to take whichever platform they desire. They don't need to switch tracks here. They just can. So I'm going to let this out. I'm going to run this. I'm going to let this bed in. So let's watch first of all the single track. Immediately the single track has this problem that the trains need to wait for each other and merge. But it's not too bad. It's not actually. This is not fully saturated, but let's see. So there's a little bit of waiting. The trains go through, but that's not doing too bad. So let's also, now this is bed down. Let's reset the production counters, as we always enjoy doing. And let's hope that's actually resetting them. Did that work? Yes, yes, we have reset that. Good. And now here is the crossover. So this is the problem that I was talking about. This train crosses over. This train goes, oh, that signal is red. I'm going to reserve the path and I'm going to cross over here. So I think this may be almost as bad, if not as bad, as the single track situation. But let's carry on this. Let's carry on going on and on and on. So the next is the chain flip flap. So let us see. And this is actually not doing too badly. These are accelerating And these are neither flipping nor flapping on the second part. They are occasionally flipping on the first part. So this looks like it might be okay. And then this is the complex one. And this has this. What does this actually do? And let's talk about what this actually does. And while we're waiting for these to go, so this is a priority. And what happens is, as soon as a train on this line is in this section, as soon as that happens, this signal here goes red. So in order for a train to merge across here, it has to be able to merge across here without blocking the path of a train from here. And in fact, with this, what you probably will see is, because this is quite close to saturated, the trains will just balance like that. They will reach a kind of equilibrium. And so you see a little bit of slowing on here with the signals, but yes, these you'd see they're nicely balanced. But that's because they don't have a particular destination or junction that they need to go to. So let us have a look. What are the scores? The scores on the sawmills, please. So, control sawmill, completely independent, absolutely nothing, no need to swap, is at 3377 to start with. So, now, single track sawmill is 1913. So, let's just pop that. Why am I looking at the options? I should be looking at that. So that's 1913. Now, interestingly, this is still slightly higher throughput than the sort of 1800 we get off a single. And the chain railroad, this actually isn't too bad throughput-wise. And you could build one of these, and like a sort of 100 or so boost to your... So now the crossover transfer. So one thing that surprised me is the crossover transfer does operate a little bit better, even losing that capacity. This is 2088. So this is actually slightly better, but still not very good, is it? And now, the change flip-flap. So you can see the trains are getting in each other's way, but it is actually doing very well. This is actually at 2998. So the change flip-flap is actually just breaking these apart, just not having these as crossovers and having them as a flip followed by a flap. That is actually very effective. And that's pushed the throughput all the way up to 3,000 tons. It doesn't look that pretty because their train's stopping, whatever. Now let's have a look down here. And this is the very hard to build, the co-op failsafe join. Lots of pre-cycles, lots of messing around. I'm not sure how this works. Well, this works if you don't have two-way end of line either. But let us see, and I think, and let us have a look. Because that's interesting. That train should not have done that. And that's a fascinating problem. So maybe giving up some throughput here over this not being signalled correctly. But let's see if that was an aberration or whether that was me failing to build the junction. But that's 3141. So this is tricky. It is better. Oh, it's just dropped a bit. It is better than the chain flip flap. So it is, but there is a question of, is it actually worth building? And I know this is kind of a horrible question to ask, but it is true. Is this actually worth building? And for that tiny uplift in throughput, that sort of, and it's down now at sort of 50 tons, 100 tons. Do you really need that extra 100 tons? Now, maybe on a longer trip, this would work better. And so that's part one. And that is a result, which is really, if you're building junctions, build the chain flip-flap. The fail-safe join is just not worth the extra effort. The flip-flap is good enough. As I often say with these, at least this is not a horrible result where the entire world has been turned on its head, which is single track is poor, crossover is not great. Crossover, you may as well just not build. Double tracks, you may as well just leave it as a single track, as far as we're seeing here. And chain flip-flap is good. And the co-op junction is a bit better, but it's really worth building all of that. Well, if you wanted to build a nice attractive junction, and you maybe had a more complex network, that the sort of or trains which were slower to accelerate as well, which is another reason I don't like this. I don't like why this one keeps sort of popping itself over there. That does seem to be a problem on that. I'm not so keen on the exits there. And let's see. That's so. I don't know why that one does it. There's probably some really obvious signalling thing going on here. And then there's a bit inconsistent signalling here. Let's just make this all consistent. So this should be two-way. This can I make this a two-way? Does that change anything? Does that stop trains trying to do what they're doing? If I could click the fast forward accurately, that. And yes, that's helped. So let's see if that's sort of upping the. I know, no, it really doesn't. They do love going sort of through there, no matter what, and they shouldn't be doing that. But let's just. Oh well, let's not worry too much. I assume that's just a Pathfinder weirdness going on there. But yes, the FSG. So let's go back and then let's really mix this up now. So I get to take these trains, and rather than having their free choice of this, they're now going to go via the waypoint, and there, and there, and there. So those are going to go via the waypoints. So they're actually going to start using the waypoints now. And again with this, go to waypoint, full load, go to there, and then going to go to that waypoint. The same with these. So this should now. My theory is this is going to absolutely knacker the throughput. This is not going to be happy times for throughput, because now the trains, rather than kind of what they've done here, which they just nicely sort of balance themselves out and it's all worked out fine. They are now having to conflict with each other because they are now going to have to swap between tracks. So I'm going to get back to Storybook. I'm going to reset that. And I'm going to run this in high speed to see what happens. So let's have a look at this. So this is now complete and total, utter chaos. But it may sort of even itself out as they go via each waypoint. So the single track, yes, is total chaos. The crossover has a lot of waiting. There's trains waiting everywhere. They're really not balancing themselves out nicely. They might, given time, but let's give it a bit more time. Let's reset that again so this has time. The flip-flap is actually doing okay. There's definitely a lot more waiting going on in this. This, by the way, this waypointing thing, this kind of simulates the behavior where you have trains which need to go to different stations on your main line. This is actually a reasonably good simulation of this. But now, let's have a look at the failsafe join. So the failsafe join is interesting because the failsafe join now has this weird property where this train here is kind of going off to the entry signal, and I think this is a Pathfinder issue. So let's just get let's just get to try that. So that doesn't really matter. That doesn't affect the Pathfinder at all, and which way round that is. So this doesn't really affect the Pathfinder. It is just that the trains are kind of slowing down, and they are waiting. They're kind of forced to go up there now. And if we had two of these, we might do slightly better. But yes, this where they're coming onto the main line. This is very slow. So if we had a longer track, we had more of these. This might work a lot better because the Pathfinder would have alternatives. So I'm being a little bit unfair to the failsafe join here. This is just that this is not long enough. Maybe in a future science we'll come back to it. But let's have a look again. Let's go back to the storybook. Let's see what this has done to our sawmills. So the single track sawmill, well, no surprises really. The single track sawmill has not really seen that much of a drop off. It's a little bit less, but no surprises, because there's really the only point at which a train has to make a decision is going here. And so sometimes maybe 3 platforms will be full here and 1 won't over here, but that's not too different. So now the crossover. So what happened to the crossover? So the crossover was 2073, and in fact, this is quite interesting. So the crossover did not get much worse. And that's partly because the trains are always trying to cross over. Normally here, whereas here sometimes they're not. So this actually doesn't really have much an issue. And the chain flip-flap, they got up to 2447. So the chain flip-flap took a big hit in capacity from this, from us doing this, which is quite interesting in itself, I guess. That took a big hit. The self-join, and this is where I had to go back sort of multiple times and go, have I built this correctly? Have I built this to the instructions? Because there is something absolutely wild happening, and the only thing I can see that might be a bit of a difference is, yes, because it's a Pathfinder problem. And these have to go here. There's no alternative, so they are going to go and sit and wait for that. But this has been really, really hit hard by this. And I, as I say, I'm being a little bit unfair to it, because if I had 2 of those joins, so let me see if I could do that. Now that there would be a lot of rebuilding. So it'd be interesting to see if we had 2 of those joins, whether that would work or whether that would just slow down. But I think this actually is interesting, because this junction, which had a good purpose when we were doing the join for an overtaking lane, this doesn't work where you actually need to take that, and it actually slows down. So there's an interesting thing here on that is, should you build these things? Well, if you absolutely want to squeeze that last bit of throughput, and you have a very specific thing that you want to do, then these junction styles can work, but they have a specific task. And when I changed that task, the simple junction, the flip-flap, kind of, took a big penalty in throughput, but it still kind of worked. No, it still sort of did an okay job. And whereas this just kind of fell apart when I changed its job. It stopped working. It's a very, very specialized junction, which is the case that these trains are not trying to get to the other waypoint, the other side. You see here, this one is working really nicely and stopping them merging, but it only works if the trains don't actually need to change direction. There's an interesting question here, which is if I were to do a little bit of kind of junctioneering here. So I'm going to give another option here, which is I'm going to let the trains, that depot is in the way, that's annoying. Yes, I'm going to let the trains go over here if they want. At quite a stiff Pathfinder penalty for this. That's not going to work, is it? That's going to be a very stiff Pathfinder penalty because it has a slow track in it. But there we go. I'm going to do that. I'm going to see. So I'm going to just reset the older storybook. And I just want to see if that makes a difference. So now these trains can go here and they can slow down the main line. So this is just adding more problems to the junction, and they've kind of messed with it now. But interestingly, that now the failsafe join combined with actually the old flip-flaps doing even better, and flip-flaps seem to have balanced itself out. So let's go check these against each other. So control is obviously doing well. Single track's down at sort of 1800. Crossover is sort of worsened again. The flip-flap actually is doing slightly better. And the FSJ is kind of, it took a boost early on, and then it's kind of sitting down below the flip-flap again. So even that kind of didn't really help. I didn't expect it to really help. But it's kind of brought it up to the same standard as the flip-flap. But it's still, really, yes, we've changed the task of the complex junction, and now it's fallen apart. So there we go. So that is another one of those very sort of results which I'm often giving you, which is there's a very simple approach which will work in most cases. Is sort of good enough unless you need that very last kind of 10% of throughput in the idealized case, is the chain flip-flap is actually pretty good. It's not that much worse in the case, so let's up that, because I think it was obviously taking a little while to even out. So let's change that up to 2699 or whatever that was. So it's not that much worse than the control experiment. It's not perfect, but oh yes, that would help if I hadn't done that. So it's actually much worse, isn't it? Over at the crossover. Let's crossover sawmill as 1938, and the chain flip flap is 2699. So yeah, so this actually works pretty well for most cases. So there we go. So there's your actual scientific sort of test of what junction should I build when I need this double track merging layout, and it's the chain flip flap. So there we go. You made it through science without horrific controversy as well. And I think we found that the co-op-style junction was slightly better. It is worth building if you have the time and you really want that. But yes, the crossovers are bad, and yes, single track is not better than double track. Yeah, the only thing is, yes, this chain flip flap is actually a very, very effective junction, and possibly if you look at the real world, also one of the more realistic options as well. So there we go. That is enough science, and I shall stop doing science before I come up with some other horrific, unexpected, heretical result. And if you have any questions on what science you would like me to do and things you would like me to explore, feel free to drop them in the comments, and I will take a look. Ideally, some science which is not going to turn the entire what is the best way of doing things on its head, but that's why we do the science. We find out on the way. And that's it for now, and I shall see you in a future video.